This video will demonstrate how to use the ItemObjects and Dictionaries module to create a dynamic menu for this tower defense game. For this tech upgrade screen, we have two sections of menus here. This is the first one that's going to be various tower types, and when you click on those, the other menu is going to open up, and this is going to be various upgrades for those tower types. So you see the tower name here, and there's a back button, and the idea is that you can click on any of these, and it goes back and forth between these two canvases. So we'd like to populate these buttons based on the actual towers that we're going to have in our game. And rather than hard coding this, we're going to use the ItemObjects module to handle all of the tower upgrades. When the player is able to use a specific tower, that's going to be represented by an item object in a game item object list attached to the player. So let's go ahead and start by creating those item objects. We're going to go to the GameModules menu. You can get there by clicking this GameModules Manager window, and then click on the item objects. And we're going to start by creating just a bunch of possible towers we might need. So a fire tower and an ice tower, laser tower. So I'm not sure if we're going to use all of these, but these are some off the top of my head that we might want. And I'm just going to call this tech as the object type. And let's choose a new location here. We're going to choose the GameModules objects. That's where we're keeping all of our other GameModules objects. Click the create button, and now they are created. You can click this to see the individual objects there. You can inspect these and edit them that way, or you can use the GameModules window here and edit them in this view as well. So let's start by getting these buttons to be populated based on these tech tower names here. On our scroll panel, we have our upgrade panel main. So let's go ahead and load that script up. So we've added a list of item objects here. We're going to call it tower objects, and we'll populate those. So now whenever this is activated, we'd like to create new buttons and populate them based on details in these item objects. And in our main panel here, we're going to add a new reference to our prefab. All right, and now with that, we're going to create an onAwake method. Now here on awake, we're going to clear the list, and then for each item object in our tower objects, we're going to create a new button, instantiate that, put it into the content transform, and then get the component, the tech upgrade tower button component, call setup, passing in our item object and this as the parent, and then add that to our list. Now our tower button is going to need a reference to its own stuff, including its text, so let's go ahead and start with that. And then on setup, we're going to change the text to the item object's object name. Let's go ahead and press play and see what happens. All right, so now they're all showing here, so that's great. We can click in and go back. This doesn't do anything quite yet. These just still load up that panel without actually adding anything like the tower name. We'll work on that in a minute. Let's go ahead and update the font so it looks a little bit better. Alright, so now our buttons are being populated. We can click into them. They don't do anything quite yet. We'll fix that. But we have our towers here that we have populated with the item objects. Now the next step is to make pretty pictures in the background here. And we're going to utilize the dictionaries on the item objects for this. Each one of these is going to have a sprite that will be added to the background. Let's go back to our game modules here. And if we look at our types, we can manage the dictionaries for all of the tech types. And so let's click on the dictionary structure, and we're going to add a key called this icon. Keys are always the same for every type of object. So the type of an object is the folder that they're in. So all of these tower item objects are of type tech. And so all tech items are going to have this icon in their dictionary structure. So if we go back to our item objects, we can go to our dictionaries on each one, and we can see there is an icon, and we can add a sprite, and we're going to populate this in just a minute. All right, now we've populated these with our sprites, so each one has its own sprite, and I just realized we actually forgot the gun tower. And so let's go ahead and create that. The great thing about the game modules, you can always just add more, and there are going to be set up for you. So we can just create the gun tower there, and when we go into it, we have our dictionaries here. And so we'll create the value sprite and add our gun tower to that. All right, so now let's update the code so that these sprites are added to the images when the button is set up. So we've added a property here for the icon sprite, and to grab something from the dictionaries, we're just going to call the item object dictionaries, then get the value of type sprite from the key icon. And so the dictionaries here, the key is the icon. We've added a value for sprite, and we have one here. When we just call value, we're going to return the first option. If we did have multiple sprites in the list here as shown, then we have additional options here where we can choose either the specific index or just to pull a random one from the list. And then in our setup here, we're going to just call icon image.sprite equals icon sprite. And one thing I just realized that we need the item object to be set before we call the sprite. So we're going to start by populating the item object and just change the order of those operations. So now all of the images show in the background, and we've also made the buttons a little bit smaller to fit the 4:3 aspect ratio of the images. Now it's time to populate the next panel here to show the individual upgrades that a user could purchase for the towers. To start, we're going to rename the objects to be towers, and now in GameModules they are all the towers type, and we can create new ones. We're going to call this gun tower upgrades, and this is going to be all the different upgrades for the gun tower. Alright, so we're going to create a new object type called gun tower upgrades with these item objects, and so let's go ahead and create those. And now let's create more for the other types as well. Alright, so now we have upgrades for our missile towers, ice towers, gun towers, and our fire towers. Those are the only ones we have in the demo right now, so I'm going to stop there and continue with the rest of this menu. Every GameModules object has an object name, which is the name of the scriptable object, and an object type, which is the name of the folder it's in. So for each one of these fire upgrades, the object type is fire tower upgrades. We're going to let the towers know which object type they care about when populating the different upgrades that they can get of that type. So to do that, we're going to go back to our types, and under towers, we're going to look at the dictionary structure, and we're going to add a key called upgrade type. So now when we click on the different towers here, we can see that in addition to the icons, we also have this upgrade type, and we're going to add a value for a string. And for each one of these, we're going to populate the name of the item object type that this tower will care about. So we're going to create a new script upgrade panel options, and we're going to bring that onto the tower options here. Let's create a setup method that can be called. So we have a setup method now, and we're going to pass in the item object that's being clicked on from the tech upgrade tower button to the options panel, and that's going to help us populate these buttons on this panel. Alright, so in our setup, we're going to cache our item object and update the text to the object name. We also have a property here for our upgrade object type. This is grabbing from the dictionaries the string from the key upgrade type. So in the guns case, it's going to be gun tower upgrades. Now we need to get all of the item objects of that item object type. And to do that, we're going to use the item repository. So we'll add this using static infinity PBR modules item object repository to the top of our class. And to grab the list, we're going to create a new variable for upgrade objects. We're going to grab our list of item objects by calling the item object repository item objects by type and passing in our type, which is a string. For each object in the upgrade objects, we're going to create a new button. And this button is going to get the component tech upgrade tower upgrade button, and then we're going to do a setup for that. The button's going to be acting a little bit differently than the other buttons, and we'll add that to our list. So now we just need to call this setup method from our upgrade panel main. Whenever the tower button is clicked, we're going to activate the panels here, and then we're going to call option panels.getComponent. So in our tower button clicked method here, we're going to activate the options panel and then set up that passing in this item object and then deactivate this panel. And for those with a keen eye and an understanding of GameModules, you may have noticed I've actually not brought in the repositories. This is a requirement for the GameModules. It's how the GameModules systems talk to the scriptable objects that you create for your project. So you can find them in the repository prefabs. We're going to bring in everything except for this one that's going to be deprecated. This is from the old version of the GameModules, and we're leaving it in there so that people's existing projects don't necessarily break. And everything else we can bring over. And there we go. So now we have all of our upgrades for Gun Tower being populated. And if we look at fire tower, we have the fire tower buttons as well, and ice tower as well. Now we can actually make these buttons look a little bit different. We haven't set the backgrounds for them yet. I don't have a background for each one of these at this point, so we're just using the default background, but we can update the style of this a little bit. There we go. And we don't have the ability to actually do any upgrades yet. We can see that we're clicking on these, but nothing happens yet. That'll be the next phase. But that ends this tutorial, which demonstrates how to use the GameModules item objects and the GameModules dictionaries to populate a menu dynamically based on the different objects you have in your game. And now whenever I add a new upgrade to the game, they'll automatically just show up here without me having to do anything. So definitely check out the finished tower defense demo project when it's complete, so you can see how the GameModules is used in the tech upgrade flow for this project. If you have any questions, come to the Discord, and I hope to talk to you real soon. Thanks.